Greetings, fellow warriors, and welcome to the Warrior Insights channel. The purpose of this channel is to provide you the truth of world news with a macroeconomics perspective, insights from my personal life experience, both from living around the world and nearly a decade of serving as a law enforcement officer, boots on the ground status reports from myself and my fellow warriors, education on how to be prepared to survive and thrive in the chaos being imposed from us from various high-level organizations. If you'd like to submit news of special interest, such as local food shortages, power grid attacks, infrastructure failures, or anything else you feel might be of interest to this channel, please send them to warriorinsights1@gmail.com. That's warriorinsights with an S, the number 1 at gmail.com. In today's video, I'm going to go over my latest Substack article, which I published this morning, entitled Chinese Balloons and Facts About High Altitude Capabilities, as you see on your screen right there. I will link the article in the description below so that you can follow along or read about it a little bit more in depth than I'm going to cover here. I wanted to provide you with my research on this topic after this subject has been reviewed for the past several days, and it's been out there, and try and determine what is important to you, the subscriber, about these high altitude balloons, what their capabilities are. So I researched pretty in depth about what my questions were and what other fellow video watchers were in the comments of other YouTube videos. And so this is what guided my research for this Substack article. So everybody's heard about the Chinese balloon, and I put alleged Chinese balloon because we won't really know 100% for sure that it did come from China, even though some Chinese sources said, yes, it's our balloon. It was a weather balloon that went awry. But are we really sure that it was a Chinese balloon? We may never know. And so the primary topic of concern, I would say, is this top line, that it was detected from Canada. It went over Montana, and it was eventually shot down near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So the primary question is, how did this balloon, or first of all, this balloon floated all over these states. It was not detected for quite a while that we know of, or it might have been detected, but it was not shared with the population. And we'll go a little bit further into that. That, I think, is the number one concern. Balloons have been used in war. World War II, Japan's used balloons. Called the Fugo balloons as a form of air warfare. They were designed to carry bombs over a long distance and drop them on the United States in hopes of causing widespread damage and panic. So they launched approximately 9,300 Fugo balloons, and an estimated 900 balloons reached the U.S. So this has been done before. And I've seen an article talk about how the payload wasn't that high of this particular balloon, but how high can the payloads go? Well, interesting fact is that China recently tested a 1.2 ton payload balloon on September 30th, 2022. 1.2 tons can carry a lot. So this is the picture of that 1.2 ton balloon, September 30th. Then we have to talk about EMPs, an electromagnetic pulse, and what that could potentially do to our power grid, to our vehicles, to our cell phone towers, all of our electronics. Radio stations, news stations can be wiped out by an EMP. I saw some comments saying the balloon was not high enough to detonate an EMP effectively. So the balloon was estimated to be at altitudes ranging from 60,000 feet to as low as 19,000 feet. Now, that was the reports. The optimal detonation height for an electromagnetic pulse is considered to be an altitude of 30 to 40 kilometers, or 95, 40 to 132,000 feet. But even though the balloon was ranging from 60,000 feet, that doesn't mean that this balloon, or any balloon, could not get up to the optimal height above the Earth's surface or above the United States to launch an EMP that would have a devastating effect. A suitable airship would be the high altitude unmanned vehicle or a high altitude stratospheric balloon, as we just saw. They're capable of reaching the required altitude, and they offer the advantage of being remotely operated, of course. So you see here, I included a chart, a high altitude EMP detonation, and it shows that how it works. It's released in the atmosphere and gamma rays spread out, and all the things that it affects. And then another thing for these balloons reason is that it can mess with our radar, or it could be undetected by our radar. As we heard that the United States military had the balloon in its sights and it lost it, and only when a civilian airliner reported the location of the balloon was it detected again. So again, it traveled from up near Canada all the way across to Montana, and then it was where it was picked up, I believe, by the airliner, and then it was finally relocated, I guess, by the military after the airliner's report, and then eventually shot down over the Carolinas. Here it is where it says, typically ground-based radar systems can detect aircraft up to 80,000 to 100,000 feet. Airborne radar systems can go from 60 to 70,000 feet. Now, if we go back up here, the EMP detonation height is pretty high, but these high altitude balloons can go very high. Now, was it a matter of ground radar systems just didn't detect the balloon? Was the balloon shielded from radar somehow? Did it have some radar interfering devices on it? We may never know. Then these high altitude stratospheric balloons have been known to have LiDAR on them. Here's an example of that. And some people in the comments were saying that, oh, well, they could be using LiDAR to map our missile silos and our underground bunkers and bases. And while a lot of people say, well, those are already known, that's no new information, we have to take in consideration what kind of updates did the Chinese or potential other foreign spies want to collect. Now, a balloon may be able to collect better pictures and video from different angles that satellites cannot gather. Satellites are a lot more high in the air, and yes, of course, they have been noted to read license plates or, ticket stubs since, decades ago. But what about angles? Satellites can typically read straight up and down, whereas a balloon might be able to get the base or bunker from multiple different angles that satellites cannot gather. And it makes a point, or it can make a point, to show how these balloons somehow strategically floated over several military bases undetected, leaving them vulnerable to attack. Then that a lot of people were saying, well, the balloons cannot be steered anyway. They have limited steering capability. And while it says that they're not typically designed to be steerable, you can steer them. You can actively guide, although they're typically guided by prevailing winds. They can add these active propulsion or control systems, or they can add rudders, and they can use the jet stream to their advantage or their main path of travel. But I'm sure that by now they have the technology to steer them in some kind of manner. Another thing we have to address is that balloons can be easily launched from ships anywhere. It's been done since the 50s, at least, such as this USS Valley Forge. And we've heard stories of Russian warships off the coast of Hilo, Hawaii. And who's to say that the Russians didn't partner with the Chinese to put their balloons on one of their warships and launch these balloons themselves? We may never know. And so the thought that these types of balloons can be launched from any ship in the ocean is relatively concerning, because it could be anybody. And you don't know how, and they can, how many of these things that they could put on a boat at one time and ship them off. And that's why I pointed out here, remember hearing about the Russian ships off the coast of Hawaii. Then we come to the timing of the Chinese balloons in particular, or this balloon in particular, was that it was before Anthony Blinken's, the Secretary of State, his visit to Beijing. And I found a Zero Hedge article that covered this person's tweet that talked about the real story is probably why the story became a story in the first place. And it talks about Blinken's visit to China and foreseeable that a story like this one on the eve of the trip would have made it politically difficult for Blinken to go. So is this a false flag to get the Americans against the Chinese? Is this saying that the Chinese are provoking war with us and we shouldn't go and talk to them? So we have to consider this: internal forces to prevent any U.S.-China relations. Now, the Pentagon came out in this Zero Hedge article. They quoted the Pentagon and says, the payload wouldn't offer much in the way of surveillance that China couldn't collect through spy satellites. And I've already talked about that it can carry a very large payload, and it may offer some insight that cannot be or enhanced through satellites. The balloon posed no serious physical or intelligence threat. I would say that's not true. Again, given the amount of payload that these balloons are capable of carrying and other factors that I'm going to discuss ahead. Here I included a chart of the Chernobyl fallout. And I said the balloon could have traced the jet streams for an experiment of nuclear detonation and subsequent fallout. Meaning, if a nuclear bomb is launched in the air, or nuclear attack basically is carried out, how far will that fallout travel? And if we're using the balloon as an example to track the jet stream, it could be a potential sniffer for that. So I researched the maximum distance that nuclear fallout can travel to find, which depended on several factors: the altitude of the detonation, the size and yield of the weapon, prevailing wind patterns, and the geography of the area. And the higher altitude detonations, which these balloons can provide, can result in a fallout that can travel hundreds or even thousands of kilometers downwind. So again, a high altitude stratospheric balloon might be the perfect undetectable way to launch a nuclear missile. Then another threat to us as the American people with balloons of this type is that they are capable of collecting radio frequencies and cell phone tower data. We already know through certain applications like TikTok that they are collecting your data to include keystrokes, phone book, contact information, websites visited. We know that they're already hacking into your systems and learning about everything that you do. This is just another method. The high altitude stratospheric balloons can collect cell tower and radio frequency data. They're equipped with sensors and instruments that can detect and measure various types of RF signals, including those used by cell towers to provide cellular coverage. Some people say, well, it doesn't matter. I think it does matter. You don't know what they're looking for. You don't know what towers they're choosing. I say everything matters. And it is popular because it offers the benefits of other methods of data collection, quickly and cost effective, and can provide a comprehensive view of the environment. So you just never know. One thing that they said about, oh, well, shoot it down right away. I would say yes in certain aspects, but it could just be the minute they gather any type of data, they're sending it to their cloud and they're wiping the system. So some people said, and I kind of agreed in a certain sense, where they waited to shoot it down because they wanted to collect the data that they were gathering. Well, I saw a video of what happened and how the balloon was taken down, and they destroyed it. I mean, they destroyed all the evidence basically with the missile. And I think that was a horrible idea on how they did it. They should have collected the device and find a way to sink the balloon slowly. Again, not saying that the Chinese couldn't have either transmitted the data already or completely wiped it before as soon as it was detected, or wiped it as soon as it collected it and just put innocent weather data on it or anything. That's neither here nor there, but I didn't appreciate the way that they took it down. Then we look at the cost of these high altitude stratospheric balloons. You got to look at all this cost of military aid that we've sent over to the east. It's somewhere between, let's say 97 to 115 billion at this point. And you got to think about these balloons are relatively expensive potential weapons. Considering the millions of dollars in equipment, fuel, and manpower utilized in tracking and strategically taking it down, we're looking at about, for the very advanced ones, several $100,000. Well, how much did it cost in fuel, manpower, surveillance to take out this balloon? This one single balloon that was floating over the United States for several days. You really got to think about that and how many they can send. I kind of use the ratio here of gold. It would be a drop in the bucket for the country which purchased 6.6 tons of gold from Russia in 22 alone to manufacture and release tons of these balloons like Japan did in World War II. So it would cost them practically nothing. And they're getting away with spying on us and who knows what else. This is also a possibility. Chemical or biological warfare. Some people were saying, well, it's not possible. Well, here it is. It is technically possible. And even though it says there's no publicly available evidence to suggest that it has been used, it was experimented all the way back in the 50s with Project E77. And I'm sure there were more projects that occurred, but this is the one that I could find right off the bat. I'm sure there are more out there that I don't know about. And here they try to disperse a biological agent via balloon bombs, and they tested it for nearly a decade. So although this particular program might have been suspended, that doesn't mean they stopped it. That doesn't mean that Japan hasn't tried, China hasn't tried. It doesn't matter. If this was an idea in 1951 and the Japanese were using balloons of this type, that doesn't mean that everything just stopped because it didn't work back then, because it is technically possible to do it. And I'm not saying that they will, but it is a possibility. So again, I talk about why was the balloon taken down so late? Why did they wait so long? I did consider radiological material that could have been a danger to the public on the ground, but I'm sure the balloon floated over sparsely populated areas or unpopulated areas at some point. Why did they wait until it got over the water? Now, there might have been reasons that we don't know for why it waited to do what it did. However, When the balloon was shot down, if you see the video footage, it completely obliterated the equipment that it was carrying. And it's really a destruction of evidence. And in law enforcement, we were always told, once you approach the scene or get to the scene, be exactly careful what you touch, where you step, what you find. Don't move anything until it's photographed. Collect as much forensic data as possible and gather as much evidence in the state that you found it. The destruction of evidence here was atrocious. You are not going to recover anything from that except for maybe a few pieces. What was the motive behind that? I think we have to consider why. And I'll leave that for you to draw your own conclusion about why we completely obliterated it when we could have at least collected it for any type of information whatsoever. I mean, even if it was just to absolutely confirm that it was Chinese, there's only so much you can get from photographs. Even if the F-22s photographed the thing intensely or other aircraft photographed it intensely, you don't know what was shielded in there. You don't know if there were any other type of devices that were shielded by a cover that were unable to be photographed. You don't know what kind of equipment was on there. You don't know what kind of writing was in there. Again, it was a very irresponsible thing to do. And I will let you draw your own conclusion as to why that was done. I had to include this. We should always be asking ourselves, what else could this be? Is it a hoax to get the American people on board with going to war? We know that they have partnered so many ways, and this is a possibility. We know that. Also, we have to think about, is this distracting people from something else? Whether it's what's going on across the border or across the border too, because we have problems seriously with hundreds of thousands of migrants coming across our southern border every day, or every month rather. But that's also a huge problem that nobody's talking about anymore. What's going on in the East? Certain laptops, documents that are popping up in other people's homes of people of special interest. We have to look at the proverbial here. If we're looking at proverbial or literal balloons itself, we have to think about, what are they distracting us from? We can't forget the person or entity on the ground controlling the balloon or controlling the distraction. And they're collecting the data and the response of the public and the military at all times. What did the American people do when X happened? And then they record that, and then they use that for future use. Regardless of the reason, it did enter our airspace. It will remain there for a while, and it should be concerning, especially given the capabilities of high-altitude stratospheric balloons, as I've outlined above. But I always conclude my Substack articles with this: how can you prepare yourself against something like this? While you may never be 100% prepared, taking steps to being prepared every single day is important. And I stress that, especially with what's going on from a multitude of factors. I included this in EMP Shield. Now, this EMP Shield company that I've linked here in my Substack article provides EMP protection for homes, cars, boats, planes, and other electronic devices. It is very effective, and it can save you and have you be the only car in the road functioning to get the heck out of Dodge if you need to. It can save your home. And I know, if you think about it, well, if it destroys the entire power grid, well, your home is going to go with it too. However, if it at least saves the power or your breaker box from exploding, that when they are able to restore power, at least you won't have to repurchase those materials for your home. If the power grid goes down and you have an EMP shield on your car, you still might be able to travel around. If you have like an e-bike and you have an EMP shield on your e-bike and you're able to power it via solar charger, you still might be able to get around. So consider an EMP shield for your home or your car or any type of mobile device that you might use to save yourself in case this does happen. As you know, the power grids have been attacked across the United States, to include several locations in the Carolinas and Tacoma, Washington, just to name a few. Then we can also consider Faraday bags or cages. I had one on my desk, but it's not there anymore. For your personal electronic devices to shield them from EMP impulses. I also just purchased a Mira gas mask. It's one of the highest rated gas masks in the industry. NATO certified and full face mask, and you can see through it out the sides if you needed to take care of any enemies while wearing a gas mask. So consider that. And here's iodide tablets to prevent damage to your thyroid in case of nuclear emergency. The people of Chernobyl weren't told for 3 days after the incident that it was dangerous to be outside. And although nuclear fallout may take a little while to reach you, one of the primary damages is to your thyroid. That's one of the highest absorbers of any type of nuclear radiation other than your skin in immediate fallout, but your thyroid will absorb that. If you take iodide tablets, this isn't medical advice or anything, but if you do take these, it should help just in case measure. Take a look at it, research it. Let me know what you think. And one of my themes about warriors is to stay strong, especially physically, mentally, emotionally. Stay vigilant. Always be aware. Never get complacent. And until next time we meet, ever forward. Always move forward and live your life well and prepared. Thank you for watching. Have a great day, and please subscribe to my channel.